Welcome back to Rollin with Olan. I'm Jeff Olan, your host. Today's guest is an entertainment lawyer, a producer, musician, accomplished writer, a trailblazer, and a really good friend. Stephen Lowe, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Great being here.
Stephen, thank you. Thank you again for coming to Rollin with Olan and for exploring with the audience and with myself everything there is to know about entertainment law, or at least in the little bit of time that we do have. I wanted to start out. You know, you and I have known each other for a long time, but I wanted to enlighten the audience a little bit about if you could go into a little bit about young Stephen. You know, growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, I believe.
Greenwich,
Can
Connecticut.
you
Yeah.
tell us about that? Your family dynamic, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Greenwich, Connecticut is a fairly nice town in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And, um, had a relatively happy childhood, but I did become fairly rebellious fairly quickly, and started actually, um, kind of getting in trouble a lot for doing all kinds of stuff, which you probably shouldn't go into
Really, we
at this
can't go
point.
into one little thing. You can't tell us a little story
Prefer
about.
not to. It's all behind me. And then I pretty much always knew I wanted to be a lawyer too. I probably decided that when I was in junior high school. Just seemed like a natural fit for me. And then I kind of cleaned up my act when I started going out with my high school sweetheart the last couple of years of high school. And then, I
Good, you
went
know,
to
because
college.
I was going to ask you about your high school and your experiences in high school. You know, sports, music. Obviously, you had a girlfriend. Tell us a little bit more about those years.
Yeah, well, my first year of high school, I kind of hung out with what they called the freaks. And the freaks were basically the kids who smoked pot.
Okay.
And then I kind of cleaned up my act and I got on the wrestling team and then the varsity wrestling team. And I ended up being friends with all the different factions, the jocks, the freaks. My girlfriend, who was Italian, was in with all the greasers, which was the other group, the Italians. So I ended up being friends with all the different subgroups at Greenwich High School, from the freaks to the greasers to the jocks. And so by my senior year, I was pretty popular.
Was it the same girlfriend all throughout high school?
Yeah, was. I was with her for about 5 years. Uh-huh.
Yeah. You know, you say you called the people smoking pot and all that the what did you call
They,
them
they
again?
called them the
The
freaks.
freaks. Yeah. In my high school,
Uh,
we called them the stoners.
Stoners, freaks, sure.
Yeah, but yeah, probably you know, very similar. High schools and just growing up with that going on back there. And then you went off from high school, you went to college, and you actually went to UConn and also Vanderbilt. Can you explain why the two colleges and how that all came
Well, no,
about?
I went to Vanderbilt undergraduate in
Oh, you
Nashville,
did. Okay.
Tennessee, and graduated in 1980. And then I kind of hung around Nashville for a while because there was a big music scene, and I was really getting into music at that time. And then I started at University of Connecticut Law School, but I actually dropped out after the first semester to be a rock star. And basically, at that point, I was playing in a band. I was the only white guy in this all black band. We were playing like R&B covers, and I did that for about 6 months and was valet parking cars in the freezing cold. And I was like, you know what? I'm going back to law school. So
See,
I
I didn't know
did.
that much. I didn't know that about you. That you
Oh
were
yeah,
actually,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I went back to law school, but as you know, I've kept working on music
Yeah,
over
yeah,
the years.
absolutely. And we'll definitely talk about that. Steven's
Right.
definitely, I mean, an incredible performer, music and piano player and singer. I definitely want to get into that. So you went to college. Were you still dating the same high school sweetheart at
I
that time?
was. I was when I went to college. I sure was.
Nice. And
And
then
that was
so
about
So from there, Stephen, you moved on. You said you decided young that you wanted to become a lawyer. When was it that you decided you were going to be? Well, first of all, what is it in your head that says you want to become a lawyer, and then to become an entertainment lawyer? How did you decide that? Because there's so many different law degrees one can get.
Yeah, well, you don't get a law degree in entertainment law. You just make a decision to specialize in that area. And that was a natural fit because of the fact that I'm so creative and everybody I know is creative. As you know, my wife's a filmmaker. And it just seemed a natural fit to kind of combine the two things, to combine law with my creative side and become an entertainment lawyer.
Okay.
Hmm.
So when you left
And
college, yeah.
interestingly enough, a lot of lawyers in general and a lot of entertainment lawyers in particular play music and or play
Oh.
bands. It's much more common than people realize.
So it's the creativity of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you left college, when did you journey out to Los Angeles?
Soon thereafter, first I started working for a firm in New York because I took the New York bar first, and this little firm, and they didn't do entertainment law, and I just knew that wasn't where I wanted to stay, and so I took the California bar. I passed the first time, and then I started applying to schools to firms in California, as well as to firms in New York. I got an offer from a Madison Avenue, New York City firm, and I also got offers from a couple firms in California. And the big difference was the Madison Avenue firm. They took me to lunch, and they said, listen, have you decided where you want to go? Do you want to go to California? Do you want to stay in New York? And I was like, I haven't made up my mind yet, but if you want to give me the offer, go ahead, give me the offer. And they're like, no, we're not going to give you the offer until you decide. And then the California firms, they didn't have any problems just giving me the offers. So I was like, you know what? California is better. They're giving me the offers. They're not holding back the offers. And I kind of wanted to go to California anyway for all the usual reasons, not only potential success in my career in the entertainment industry, but also, of course, the weather and beautiful women
Right.
and all of the above.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so when you came out to LA, um, were you set with a job at that point in time?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was a great firm. They were called Reines and Blum. They were downtown, and actually ended up being real good friends with Howard Blum. Friends with him to this day. One of the partners. We used to hang out together because he was single. We'd go out, and it was a great culture at that firm. I really liked it.
Yeah. And all during that time, you were just hanging out, the LA scene, being a bachelor,
Yeah.
doing all that stuff. And so, how many law firms did you work with before you actually started your own? And we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, so I stayed at Reines and Plum for a couple of years, and then I got an offer at an entertainment firm, and I went to work for them, but it wasn't nearly as much fun, and I ended up getting fired from that firm, and then I ended up getting fired from a couple of more firms. I was what they call a cowboy. Like I wanted to do things, I had my own ways of doing things, and so I didn't fit in, but usually, to be honest with you, it usually had nothing to do with my work product. It usually had 2 years in a row. It had to do with something that happened at the Christmas party, believe it or not. Yeah, yeah. So then I was like, it's time for me to start my own firm, which I did in 1991.
Yeah, Stephen, maybe that goes back to, getting in trouble in high school and everything else. But
Right. Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. I was just a natural troublemaker, I think. One year I brought this English girl to the Christmas party, and she got pissed drunk and was swearing at everybody, and so that wasn't a good look. And then the next year, I had been dating the boss's best friend's daughter, and I didn't bring her to the Christmas party. I brought this other girl to the Christmas party, and they got really pissed about that. And even the daughter, she was like, that was a stupid move. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why I did that. It was just kind of a rebellious thing, right? And that was the kind of thing I would do. And so I brought the another girl to the Christmas party, and that didn't go over well, and so I ended up getting canned from there. And, 2 years in a row due to something that happened at the Christmas party. And that's when I decided to start my own firm in '91.
And that was 1991, I
Right.
believe.
Hmm.
You started what is it, Lowe and Associates,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and you
Well,
started
then it was just
1990.
then it was just law offices of Stephen Lowe. It's just
Oh,
me.
okay.
Hmm.
And so you started the law firm. You were doing it pretty much on your own at that point in time, or you had to
Yeah.
hire some people.
No, solo
How
practitioner.
was that? Because I mean, obviously, here you are venturing out into your own, office, doing it on your own, and obviously all the paperwork and this and that or whatever. I mean, what was that like in the early days?
You're work. You basically have to work until 11 o'clock every night, and at least. And I was pretty much working 6 days a week till 11 o'clock. And yeah, it was, when you're a solo guy, especially doing litigation, it's a tremendous amount of work. I couldn't do that now. What I did then, it's just the sheer amount of work. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
and you open it up primarily to serve the needs of the creative professionals, which brings us to what you're
Well,
doing now.
eventually, yeah. At first, I would just take whatever because I wasn't a general practitioner. I mainly did business and entertainment, but I would pretty much have to take any paying client at that point because when you start out, you're just trying to get business.
So, Stephen, when you were just starting out in the firm, you had so much to do. You were by yourself. I mean, how was that?
I mean, it's a struggle to start a law practice. Getting clients isn't the easiest thing, and there's a tremendous amount of competition in Los Angeles for clients, as you might imagine, because there's a lot of lawyers, and there were a lot of lawyers then, and you're just starting out. But yeah, it was first few years were definitely a struggle. Um, as time went on, I started to uh, you know, just kind of establish a little bit of a reputation for myself. I was pretty fearless back then. I would go to trial on cases. I'm not nearly as fearless as I was back in when I started my firm in the early '90s. I'm a little more cautious and conservative these days. But yeah, it was exciting. Being an entrepreneur and working for myself really for the first time in my life, and I liked that.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess you would go out, you would meet people, you would have to go to functions to start building the clientele.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I would go out a fair amount at night in LA back in the '90s, but I never, ever got, and never have to this day, have never gotten a client from going out at night, ever. So
Really?
the myth that, you go out and you schmooze and you get clients that way just didn't pan out, at least for me. A lot of people said that they were going to, call me the next day or whatever, talk to me about this case. They never did. So, yeah, I don't think going out, at least in Los Angeles, is a good way to get clients, and that wasn't how I got them.
Yeah, you know what? I understand that too. As me going out, as a casting director trying to talk to people, they do say it's the best way of kind of meeting people in person, but
Hmm.
it doesn't always work that way. It's people are so rushed; they're wherever they're at. They'll take a card, and the card will end up in the garbage or whatever.
Sure.
Nowadays, of course, it's even harder with technology almost, and so I get that. But once you got out and you started getting clients and you started building things, then the firm started taking off.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what happened. People used to ask me what kind of law I did. And this was the day where you were supposed to have a quote unquote elevator speech, and so I would be like, oh, I do corporate and entertainment and business and contracts and music and film, and I'd have this long recitation of the things that I did. I'd do my little 30-second elevator speech, and the problem is that elevator speeches don't actually work because the more information that you give about what you do, first of all, the more you sort of limit people, you want to be vague. And the second thing is people would always say, oh, you do everything. And I'd be like, no, I'm really specialized. And then one of my clients finally said to me, he said, should just tell people you do entertainment law. That's what you like to do. That's what you do. And so I was like, oh, you know what? You're right. So people would ask me what I did. I'd say entertainment business, which is what I say to this day. And people go, oh, okay. And that's broad enough to encompass a lot of stuff. Business encompasses all kinds of things, including real estate, which we do rarely, but we do every once in a while. And so once I started just saying entertainment business law or entertainment, the practice started growing. And then I started getting known for mainly advocating on behalf of artists and creators, which, really didn't kick in a lot. I mean, I had my first trial in the early 90s and I won, and that was a defamation case. And we do defamation to this day. But it wasn't really until the early 2000s, I think, that my reputation, I started really advancing my reputation for primarily advancing the interests of creators. And then, as you know, I eventually formed an organization in 2013, originally called the California Society of Entertainment Lawyers, and now it's since morphed into the National Society of Entertainment and Arts Lawyers. And I'm the chairman of that organization, and it is an artist rights organization, and it is a very dynamic and vibrant organization, and we're doing lots of exciting stuff. And so my reputation now is mostly as being an artist lawyer, and so we get a lot of those cases, and we get a lot of defamation cases because that's an area of our specialty too. But it takes a while to really earn a reputation in Los Angeles because there's so many amazing lawyers here, so many brilliant people in general, but lawyers for sure.
Yeah. Well, you have a great reputation, and
Thank you.
I've known you, but I also do I do my homework on these things, and I've watched you in some of the videos, and anyone could see it online. Some of the videos where you're arguing cases, you really are incredible how you do all that, and just to be that the person you are. And I have this audience, which is a lot of people who are in the entertainment business, or people who want to get in it, or people who are just fascinated by it.
Mhm.
Can you help us understand a little bit more about entertainment law, why it's so important?
Yeah, well, entertainment law falls into generally two categories. There's what they call entertainment transactional, and those are basically the deals, the contracts, and we do some of that too. We'll do everything from forming a LLC for purposes of producing a movie to obtaining a trademark to working on the original PPM, private placement memorandum, to any number of contracts that you need in the entertainment industry. But that's not really our specialty. We're not known for that. We do that, but we're mostly known for what's called entertainment litigation, which is in essence dispute resolution. And what happens there is if you're in a dispute in the entertainment industry, you would come to us and we would come up with a strategy to resolve that dispute. The typical types of disputes that we see, the most common one we see is where somebody's screenplay gets stolen. And that is incredibly common. It happens on a daily basis in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And we have a queue right now of probably 20 cases that we're looking at because nobody can afford to pay legal fees on those cases. So those cases we have to take on a contingency. And we're looking at a lot of those cases. And there's only a few firms like ours that do those types of cases. But those aren't the only types of disputes. There's obviously contractual disputes. We have a case right now with Netflix. I can't get into all the specifics of it, but it does involve a contractual dispute. And what else? There's
Intellectual property
intellectual
and
property, but
copyright and all that.
intellectual property is basically copyright or trademark infringement. There's also something called idea theft, and idea theft is a body of law primarily exists in New York and California, where let's say if you go to a pitch meeting and you pitch an idea to them, and then they end up using that idea for a TV show, let's say, you can sue for idea theft, but you have to show, you know, a whole bunch of, you have to prove a bunch of elements in that situation. And they can defend that case by saying, oh, we didn't get that idea from you, we got it from somebody else. And so, because of that loophole, what a lot of companies do is they'll sit in for a pitch meeting with you, and then they'll call their producer friend that they work on all their projects with, and they'll be like, hey, send me an email, pitch me, you know, it can't be identical to this, but pitch me, you know, basically the same idea I just got pitched, and but we'll say it came from you, but wait a week or two before you do it. And so that kind of stuff we see, because that is a loophole. Another loophole we see is that screenplay competitions and online screenplay, you know, platforms like the Blacklist, that those can effectively be used to deny screenwriters the ability to recover on their claims, because they don't know who ultimately accessed their screenplay. So there are loopholes in the law which allow people to, in effect, steal with impunity. And those are one of the things that we're rallying against through my organization, NSEAL. But yeah, those are some, you know, some sample type cases.
And you and I had talked about this ahead of time. One of the biggest cases that you and your firm have done, and if we could talk about it for a second, you're talking about similarities and stuff like that, as far as one person writing something and then somebody going off and stealing it. Can we talk about the Pirates of the Caribbean case?
Yeah, well, so the Pirates of the Caribbean case was a case where these two screenwriters had submitted a screenplay to Disney. They were already working with Disney on a project that Disney had optioned, and they were actually on the lot, the Disney lot, working with Disney on this other project. And what happened was that they went ahead, there had been the Pirates of the Caribbean ride for years, and they went ahead and I guess somebody had mentioned that Disney had been looking for years for a screenplay to kind of go along with the ride. And so they went ahead and created a screenplay called The Pirates of the Caribbean, and they submitted it to Disney, and Disney actually had it on a weekend read list, where a bunch of people were required to review it that weekend. And then the movie came out in 2003. Well, what happened is they tried to bring it up with Disney, and Disney just basically kind of, terminated their lot access, and that was, the end of it. And then the movie came out in 2003. But they were so overwhelmed with it, and they still actually had the other project that they were working on with Disney. And they didn't do anything for 14 years. And then in 2017, they finally filed a lawsuit involving the Pirates of the Caribbean, and they promptly lost the lawsuit. And they came to me on what's called a motion to dismiss. And they came to me, and they told me that they had lost on a motion to dismiss, and I read the court's order, and it appeared that the court had, applied the wrong test as far as I was concerned for substantial similarity. And so I handled an appeal before the Ninth Circuit. And this was back in 2020. And the Ninth Circuit reversed in a unanimous decision and undismissed it, put it back on the active calendar. And then what happened after that is Disney made a motion for summary judgment, meaning that they still, tried to get the case dismissed. And we were able to defeat that. And then the case proceeded with discovery, and there were depositions of our clients and all these people at Disney. And then ultimately the case settled.
It's incredible, incredible. And, just for them to come to you and having to go through what they already had gone through before even getting to you, it's probably a long time. That's a long process, isn't it?
Yes, no, it was. I mean, what had happened is that one of the writers, every time Disney would come out with a sequel to the Pirates, he would just get crazy And he ended up having a pretty significant drinking problem
Mm.
as a result of it. The other writer, not so much. He ended up becoming a high school principal and kind of maintaining his equilibrium. But when they came to me, having already lost the case after waiting 14 years to file it, they were not, in the best situations. So we were lucky and we got what's called a decent judge panel in the Ninth Circuit. That was why the reversal was unanimous, and that was great. That was in 2020. And then the case then proceeded for a couple more years before it ultimately settled.
What's the explain if you can? I was trying to dig into it a little bit, but obviously what's the selection and arrangement test?
So this is something that I've written about extensively. Um, so what was happening for many many years is that the courts were applying something called the filtration test, and what that is let's say I compare A with B to a screenplay to a movie, and what would happen is the courts would go through and they'd say, well, this is a similarity, but this isn't protectable under the copyright laws, and so we're not going to count it. And so what would happen is the court would go through, and let's say there were 50 similarities, they would find each similarity not to be protectable, and then the plaintiff would lose the case under the filtration test. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It always happened. But that was the wrong test. The right test was something called the selection and arrangement test, which is basically where you look at everything together, like you look at those 50 similarities, and you see if they make sort of a cohesive pattern unto themselves. And then if that cohesive pattern is repeated in the defendant's work, that is a violation of the selection and arrangement of the various different
Mm.
elements, because pretty much everything has been done before, and so everything individually is non-protectable because there's hundreds and hundreds of years of literature and movies and TV shows. There's no one element that's never been done before, right? You can't. There's nothing you can imagine that hasn't been done in some way in some book. And the studios all have, huge databases going back to the 1600s. Like we would sometimes, say, look at this, very unique combination of elements, and they'd be like, no, that was done in a book in 1632, and we'd be like, what? How did you come up with that? And so what we always argue is we're like, hey, court, you can't look at each individual element. You have to look at them all in totality and then see if that combination of elements was infringed upon. And that's the selection and arrangement, because you're looking at not each element, but the selection and arrangement of the elements together, and see if the arrangement or the selection was copied in the infringing work.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. And you talk about how you have. I mean, Stephen is an incredible writer. I opened with that. You've written so many articles for various, for law magazines, multiple write-ups, USA Today, everything else. You wrote an article on death of a copyright. Um, that one was quite interesting, I must say. Can you explain where you went with that?
Well, yeah, it's kind of what I was just talking about. So what happened was in 2010, I had just lost one of these copyright infringement cases, and I was like, "Gosh, I wonder, is anyone winning any of these cases?" And so we went back 20 years. I had my interns go back 20 years and look at every single case that had been filed against a studio to see if anyone had ever won, and it turned out no one had. And I was like, oh, so this is the best kept secret in Hollywood. No one ever wins these cases, right? And that's when I wrote Death of a Copyright, in which I, put together like, I think 60 or 70 cases that we had looked at. And what we had determined was that at least if you go against a major studio, you're going to lose. And that's because they're going to apply the filtration test, where they literally just go through and they find that each particular element is not protectable, and therefore, you lose, because it's so easy to find that any one element is not protectable. And they always find that. They never find that any one element. And so this filtration test had been used for years and everyone was always losing these cases. And even where, so there was one case in 1992, for example, the Shaw versus Lindheim case. What happened was they lost at what's called a motion for summary judgment. They appealed. The Court of Appeal, the Ninth Circuit, in a wonderful opinion that people cite to this day, basically said no. They used, a pattern from the plaintiff's work in the defendant's work, and so they reversed and sent it back down. The case ultimately went to trial. The plaintiff actually won, and then the judge reversed it on what's called the judgment notwithstanding the verdict. So, no one had ever won one of these cases. There was one case where they had gotten past summary judgment and then it settled on the Shakespeare and Love case in 2001. But basically nobody was winning. And so in 2010, I wrote Death of Copyright because I wanted to point out to everybody that this is like almost a joke. Like, you can't win one of these cases unless you, judge, apply the selection and arrangement test. Since then, courts have started applying the selection and arrangement test more and more. And over the last 15 years, it's changed from studios winning 100% of the time to studios winning 85% of the time.
Wow.
So you now have about a 15% chance of winning one of these cases.
Wow, that's something, right? It's
Right.
something. And you've gone. I mean, you've gone up against a lot of the studios. We mentioned earlier Disney, Time Warner, Universal, Lionsgate, so many others. And when you're going up against studios like that and the big mucky mucks of the entertainment business, how do you keep up with all the changes in entertainment, Stephen, and the related laws? I mean, that's got to change a little bit because you just talked about all this stuff back in the 1600s, 1700s. I mean, how do you keep up with this stuff?
Well, I read a publication that comes out on a daily basis. I don't read it every day, but I at least read it I go through all of them at the end of each month. And so I stay on top of all developments in the law related to entertainment law on a virtually daily basis. And you basically have to do that because the law is very dynamic. Cases are coming down every single day, and you really have to stay on top of it if you're going to be on the cutting edge, and I do. And
Yeah.
most attorneys that I know who are, on top of their game, they do that as well. You have to.
I would imagine you have to, especially with all the competition and
Yeah.
the new things that are coming down the pike.
Oh yeah.
Um, you talked about a little earlier. I want to go back into it just a little bit because it is something that you are I guess, the co-founder of NSEAL, National Society of Entertainment and Art Lawyers. How
Arts
did you
lawyers.
come up with that? Because you were a co-founder, I believe. How did you come up with that? And if you could talk about that just a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. Well, originally it was myself and a guy named Larry Zerner, who's another Beverly Hills entertainment attorney. And this was back in around about the time that my article came out in 2010. And he was like, there just isn't any organization for lawyers who represent creative talent. There's this organization called the Copyright Society, but that organization is primarily owned and controlled by NBC. And so that's mostly studio lawyers. And so there isn't really an organization for attorneys who represent, creators. And so originally we formed it back in 2013, and it was just a little networking organization. And we just get together, every other month and just kind of talk about stuff that was going on and just network. Well, as time went on, the organization grew, and we started filing what's called amicus briefs with the United States Supreme Court, among others. And we just started becoming a much more dynamic organization, putting on events, all kinds of things. And so after about 10 years in 2023, we're like, you know what? It shouldn't be the California Society of Entertainment Lawyers anymore. This should be a national organization. And we changed the name to the National Society of Entertainment and Arts Lawyers. And now we have lawyers in the organization from, throughout the country. And we're doing just a lot of stuff. In 2 weeks, we're doing an educational event regarding We have two attorneys who have been winning some of these cases, talk about some of their secret sauce for winning these types of cases and what claims they assert and how they do it. And then, in May, we have a big networking party in New York City. And then in July, we have the second annual David A. Pierce Award, which is an award for the attorney that gets selected by a voting process who helped artists the most over the last year. And we encourage, not only attorneys to become members, but also creators to become members of the organization as well and participate. We're going to have a speaker series. We have a law review article that I published, that I wrote last year that was published, which is like a scholarly article about what's called prior art, which is a whole another discussion. But yeah, we're always doing stuff, and we're out there trying to help creators any way we can. Very dynamic organization.
Yeah, congratulations on that. It's
very
it's
excited
great,
about
and
it.
just the fact what you're doing with it and helping others. How do you go about? How does your firm and you go about your decision making on taking on new clients nowadays?
How do we make a decision on new
Yeah,
clients? So yeah, I mean we're pretty selective about clients these days. Um, when I first started out, we pretty much took anybody and anything. But over the years, you kind of learn that if there's red flags, that there's a lot of ways for attorneys to get burned in these situations. You can't just if the relationship stops working between you and the client, you can't necessarily just stop representing them. You have ethical obligations to continue representing them until the court actually says that you can get out if you have a case. And so, because of that, we obviously look to make sure that their case is meritorious. And generally, we also want to make sure the person themselves is somewhat normal. And a lot of creators that we represent are a little crazy, just to be honest,
yes,
notoriously. But we've gotten decent at working with them over the years. But we do want to make sure that people aren't just completely crazy. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the entertainment industry are.
are a little. Yeah, it's like why
Yeah,
be normal, right?
right. And we take cases on some cases on contingency, but mostly we do stuff on a straight hourly basis.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, lawyers are busy. You're especially busy. You've got this firm. I mean, I know your hours. I've been to your play. I've been to your home. I know you're working when I'm even there. You're working late nights, early in the
Yeah.
morning. How often are you arguing cases in court? Because you're like I said earlier, it's fun to watch you do that. How often do you do that, Stephen?
Well, remember there's multiple attorneys with my firm. So, for example, one of the attorneys with my firm just argued a case in court this morning. So I don't necessarily, I'm not always the one who's going to be arguing. Um, but, it doesn't happen that often. Most cases are settled. Um, we did go to trial on a case this summer. We just actually got the decision, the final decision of the judge, and fortunately we won. But but yeah, 95% of cases settle, and so generally speaking, you're filing documents with the court, you're talking to the other attorney, but you're not necessarily going and arguing before the judge that much. So probably a reasonable estimate of that would be, something like maybe once a month.
Hmm.
It's not, yeah, it's not as often as one would think.
Yeah. Can you talk for briefly about creatives who are perhaps sending out their unsolicited information? I mean, they should always have a cover for that, right? I mean, they should always be doing something to protect that, so they necessarily don't need to, necessarily eventually get a lawyer like yourself. But can you talk about
Well,
that a little bit?
first of all, it's always a good idea to register your work with the United States Copyright Office, not the Writers Guild, the Copyright Office. And in general, the general rule is that you don't ever send anything unsolicited, right? That's just not how the industry works. You always want to, in essence, get permission to, in writing, to submit before you submit. And you never want to sign a submission agreement either. A lot of times, a lot of the studios will say, "Yeah, we'll take a look at it. Just sign the submission agreement." And what the submission agreement 9 times out of 10 does is it at least waives your claim for idea theft, which is a claim in California that I mentioned already. And you don't want to waive any of your claims. And so the only way you're not going to have to sign a submission agreement, or you're going to be able to submit your work, is if you submit through an agent or a reputable entertainment lawyer or a reputable manager, or you're Steven Spielberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
somebody like that. Otherwise, you've got to go through channels, and the problem is you can't get a reputable agent until you already have success. And so people are always like, well, wait, if I can't get success until I have a reputable agent, but I can't get a reputable agent until I have success, isn't that sort of a catch-22? And the answer is yes, it definitely is. You have to just sort of figure out a way to make it happen. And people have done all kinds of crazy things to kind of get around that catch-22. But it is very frustrating if you're, extremely talented, but you have no way to get your stuff reviewed by anybody.
Right.
And then you might befriend somebody in the industry, and they might be some hot producer, and you're like, oh my God, I just met this, wonderful producer. That's who I'm going to use. And then the next thing you know, the producer's claiming that they wrote it. Right? They took your name off the screenplay, and they're submitting it around. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
So it's a ruthless and cruel industry, but I used to analogize it to like the little turtles who are hatched in the sand, and they have to make it to the water.
Yeah.
And so very few of the little turtles make it to the water in this situation, unfortunately.
That's right.
Either
That's right.
because their work is stolen, or they never are really able to submit it, or because it just gets passed on. And so it's
Yeah.
extremely difficult to make it in the entertainment industry. And
Yeah.
we
How important is how important is then a DNA or an NDA rather, not a DNA, an NDA?
NDA. Um, you know, um, it's hard to get people to sign NDAs.
Mhm.
If you can, it's not a bad thing to have. But technically, under the laws of California, if you submit a work to somebody under certain circumstances, you have, in essence, largely the same protection as you would under an NDA. So people ask me this all the time. I say, if you can get an NDA, great. But most people don't want to sign them, and plus, it's kind of like, you're trying to form this relationship with someone, and then you're kind of like, hey, here's a contract, will you sign this? And so people tend to be a little resistant, but if you can get someone to sign, it's not a bad thing, but you don't have to necessarily.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, let's switch things up a little bit here.
sure.
So let's talk about Demise, and let's talk about your lovely wife, the director and writer of Demise, and Stephen, the executive producer of Demise, the movie.
Right.
Let's talk about Demise for a little bit, Stephen.
Sure.
Tell us about how that all came about.
Well, you know, Yada, my wife, was trying to make it in the entertainment industry initially as an actor. In fact, she was a SAG actor, and she was getting a lot of work as featured extra and that kind of stuff. But I was having a lot of trouble when I first met her getting any sort of roles, unfortunately, which was surprising because I thought she's very attractive. She's Latina. Thought she wouldn't have a problem. But ultimately, I don't want to say she gave up on acting, but she was like, I have to pivot on this. And so she wrote a screenplay. And when I met her back in 2016, she not only had the screenplay, but she also had a sizzle reel, a trailer for the screenplay as well, and it was amazing. Like every time I would watch the trailer, because we played it a lot of time, I would like laugh and cry from a 2 minute trailer, and I could see she was like super talented. And we tried to get Epic Love funded. That's the name of it. And unfortunately, we never got anywhere. And we needed basically like $1 million to make that movie. And it's not easy to get $1 million in Los Angeles.
Right.
And so what happened was we were just getting really frustrated with trying to get Epic Love made. And then during the pandemic, 2020, she wrote another screenplay called Demise. And Demise was, super was well, it was is a film noir, but a very fun one, and with lots of twists and turns. And everyone who read the screenplay just loved it. And we determined that we could get that screenplay made. Look at it had we needed hundreds of extras, as but we managed to you know just get a lot of extras to work for really cheap, and we determined that we could get that one made for low six figures,
Hmm.
but we need a lot of people to provide locations and all that kind of stuff. So we just cobbled together the funding through friends and family,
Hmm.
and we put Yada to work, and she turned in, of course, an amazing movie. It was 17 days filming, and then it took her a year to edit it, a solid year. We got really lucky with getting a real highly reputable editor. That was really what I think made the difference. And ultimately, she delivered, a movie that is amazing, and does not look like a low budget movie at all. We had a fantastic cinematographer, and we kind of did the impossible. And you might say, what is that? We actually found a reputable distributor to distribute the movie,
Hmm.
and so the movie has been doing really well. People seem to love it, and we just cut a deal to distribute it in the UK. They're really pumped up about
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be released in the UK soon, and then it's going to be released in Latin America soon, and it's doing great.
It's on several platforms. You want to name a few?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to name a few of the platforms that it's
Yeah,
on?
absolutely. It's on, well, of
We
course, Prime. It's on Apple. It's on Tubi. It's on lots of different platforms, and people seem to really love the
several
movie.
platforms.
Yeah.
It's out there, and being transparent here, I'm an executive producer on the film as well. But this had more to do with Stephen and I started talking in the early days. I've known Yada for a long time. I really had nothing to do with the film from the beginning. And then Stephen and we just started talking. We've been friends and became faster friends. And you know, luckily enough, with my knowledge in the industry, I'm able to help out in various ways. I also brought some background to the scene, to the scenes, but certainly not solely me. It takes an army, as you all know, it takes an army to do something like this, but I'm very proud of it. And Yada is she's got another film ready to go. I'm just going to be looking for financing and making that one happen, and so many other things. So
Yeah. And
and
she just came home from a short little trip, and she literally recited to me the entire story for another screenplay, a comedy that she wrote in her head on the way home. And it's incredible. I'm really excited about this one. She even has the title. Um, and
that's so great.
so, yeah, she's incredibly creative. She's incredibly talented. She's amazing. She's an amazing director, amazing writer. Yeah, you helped so much on that movie with mainly with extras. What's crazy is when you see the closing credit, there's literally like 150 extras, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
what Steven Yada did was gave every extra credit, which
yeah,
not too many films do, and that was pretty
huh.
amazing. But it was great. And it was a great collaboration, and that's what we need more and more of in the industry. We need great collaborations. Um, Stephen, you this was your first forte into making a movie, and I
Yeah,
remember you've told me a couple of times how much you love it. I mean, you really
yeah.
what made it so special to you
I mean, it was just so
besides your
fun.
wife being, the
I mean,
director, the
look,
writer?
and until you actually are involved with actually making a movie, you just have no idea what it's like. It's really fun. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's stressful, but it's super exciting.
stressful, no sleep, but it is
Yeah,
super exciting. You'll get your sleep afterwards.
yeah.
So, what do you love? What do you love most about being a lawyer?
I would say really being able to make a difference for people, change people's lives, either because you get the desired result or because you get a lot of money for them. Winning is super fun. Just winning in general, every win is just so fun. Um, and you can lawyers, depending upon what type of law you do, you can have profound effects on people's lives, and you can really help people a lot, and that's very satisfying to do that.
Yeah. Well, you do. You help a lot of people, Stephen, and also he is an incredible, as I said earlier, an incredible piano player, a singer. I've been to many of his private little concerts, per se. Um, you actually you have some music out now, don't you, where people could listen?
Yeah, they can. We're working on our music project, but yes, you can find it at Woodland Lane, which is the name of my band. .bandcamp.com. Woodlandlane.bandcamp.com. It's also on, I think, Spotify or something too. Apparently, somebody reached out to us about one of the songs recently. So, yeah, I'm still trying to not be a rock star like I was back in 1981, but I'm still trying. Yeah, I'm still working on my music project and career, and will
You're doing great,
forever.
man. And like I said, I've seen him in action. He's an incredible piano player. He
Uh
gets
huh.
down. I mean, and I've seen
Uh
him
huh.
normally. I see you in your socks, and you're just kicking all those, all
Right.
the right things and playing all the right keys on that piano and going crazy and singing
Uh
and having a
huh.
good time. And
Well, thank
I
you.
just love it. I love having you on this show. And we've been trying this for a while, as you know,
Right.
and Steven's time is not cheap.
Uh
Um, but is there anything else you want to say? Because I know time is limited, time is money, and again, I thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there
Yeah,
anything you want to say?
I mean, you have literally hit all of the highlights. I cannot imagine anything else that I can think of to cover that you haven't already covered.
Great, great. Well, Steven, thank you so much for rolling
Yeah.
with Olan. Thank you to the audience again. Make sure you check it out, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.